myself. So today we're talking about specifically the singer as an athlete. And we're talking about the scary subject of vocal injury. It's, of course, every singer's worst nightmare. Sometimes injuries happen, and sometimes there's zero that you can do about it. And some injuries, vocal injuries, truly are a mystery. We have no idea why they happen. So I'm not talking to that, because that is completely unavoidable, and it's a freak thing. But there are some things that we can do to set ourselves up so that we can at least go, well, I'm doing everything that I can to protect myself and keep myself healthy, so I'm not intentionally, or unintentionally doing things that are maybe setting myself up to be at a higher risk of an injury. So that's what we're talking about today. And specifically, we're going to look at athletic training and exercise science, because we're vocal athletes, and that means we are coordinating lots of different body parts to achieve a task. That is, the most basic definition of an athlete, is that you're coordinating different body parts, muscles, bones, tendons, different structures, plus cardio and breathing, and voila, you're an athlete. So we're going to look at these specific principles and how they apply to us as singers, because with just a little bit of tweaking in our brain, we go, oh, that totally makes sense, and this is how I can do this for myself. My name is Crystal Barron. I'm a professional voice coach and vocal health specialist. And I have a very personal history with vocal injury. I struggled for many years with a variety of vocal injuries. And that is, I've experienced profound vocal loss in my life, to the point that I really thought I would never sing again. And that's happened to me not once, not twice, but 3 separate occasions. And some of them were unavoidable, and some of them were avoidable. I just didn't have the resources and the education that I needed to protect myself. And so that is one of the biggest whys of why I do what I do. My driving force at this point in my life is to be the solution for singers, so that nobody has to go through what I went through in my younger years in my performance career. So we're going to dive right in. So I am in the chat when we're done. I'm going to drop a link, because I went specifically to a website, and this is like Team USA Triathlon website, to grab these 7 principles of exercise science. And then we're going to dig into each one of them and how they apply to us as singers. So the first principle of exercise science and athletic training is individuality. And what that means basically is everyone is different, and they're going to respond differently to training based on your unique body. If you have a lighter voice, and your vocal folds maybe are not quite as beefy as someone else's, that means that you are going to be inclined to be better at certain vocal tasks. That's nature versus nurture, if that makes sense. And we know this from athletes, because, the long distance runners, usually they're slender. They usually have long limbs and long stringy muscles. And those types of muscles they were born with. And then they also developed them to help them succeed in long distance running. Whereas sprinters are usually a little shorter. They probably still have a certain length to their legs, of course, but their muscles are usually bunchier and bigger, and they're usually thicker people. And again, they were born with those kinds of muscles already kind of headed in that direction, and then they developed them to maximize what those types of muscles can do. So for singers, we have the same types of things, and it's not just our vocal folds themselves, but it's the shape of the vocal tract. How we are born kind of sets us up for the kind of sounds that our body naturally is going to want to make. And so you might naturally have a brighter voice, or naturally have a darker voice, naturally have a lighter voice or a heavier voice. darker or brighter. And all of those things are not good nor bad. They just are. And then it's up to you to go, oh, I tend to have a lighter voice and a brighter voice. And I feel really natural and good when I'm singing bright, light musical theater. All right, great. So that then is what we're going to work on building in the voice. And your training regimen is going to reflect that versus somebody that maybe has really beefy vocal folds and a really huge space, down there. They're going to have a really boomy voice, and they're naturally going to be inclined to move towards other types of singing. I was watching a video yesterday with two opera singers, Jessie Norman and Kathleen Battle. And just seeing them both next to each other on stage, Kathleen Battle is very slender, and she's a color to her soprano, lyric soprano. I don't remember if I think she's a lyric. Very light voice, extremely light voice. And then Jessie Norman starts singing, and it's like a Mack truck. She's just like, whoa. And the difference between the two couldn't be more extreme. And Kathleen Battle wasn't trying to imitate what Jessie Norman was doing. She would hurt herself. That's an example of the individuality where you just go, this is my lane, this is what I do, and I'm going to embrace it. So each one of us, that's something we want to take into account. For me, no matter how hard I try, I am not going to have a dark voice. It's just not going to happen. And I can hurt myself if I am continually trying to beat my head against the wall. Just like a long distance runner, somebody that is naturally built for long distance running, if they are really trying to be a sprinter, they could probably do some of it, but their muscles can only grow so much because of the genetics. So that's something to take into account. I can talk about this all day, but we're going to move on to the second one. So the second principle of exercise science is specificity, meaning, and I've already talked about this a little bit, specific exercises will build specific skills. So if you are wanting to be a long distance runner, you want to do exercises that are going to build your stamina and are going to build the muscles in the direction that you want them to go to support long distance. So the same thing for us, for singers. One of the things that I see a lot in my studios are I'll see musical theater singers who are wanting to do pop, like contemporary musical theater and belting, but they're doing classical vocal exercises as their warm-up. I'm like, so why are you doing these exercises that are pointing you this direction when all of your repertoire is pointing you this direction, right? So you're building this beautiful diatonic or chromatic scale-wise pattern in a vocal posture that is Western classical. And then you're going to go and try to do jagged little pill. So these warm-ups are not putting you on this path. The warm-ups and the exercises, like there's exercises that just kind of warm you up, and then there are exercises that are building specific skills. So we want to be really thoughtful about the choices that we're making in our practice time, that we are remembering, okay, so this is my goal, this is where I'm headed. And a lot of singers are actually chameleons, where they don't just do one style. They're not just a jazz singer, they're not just a musical theater singer, they're not just a pop singer. A lot of musical theater singers have to be able to do 8-10 different styles, and studio singers for sure have to. So now we're talking about cross-training, and that's where the triathlon mindset really helps, because you have to train this part of your voice this way, and this part of your voice this way, and this part of your voice this way. And cross-training is actually really, really good for you in that it's going to reduce the chance of repetitive stress injuries. So if you're always doing this and always doing this and always doing this, you're always belting, that's the only thing that you do, you're putting yourself at risk if all you're ever doing is going in that lane. Cross-training is like, okay, so now I'm going to work this for a little bit, now I'm going to go over here. And the two balance each other out, which makes our bodies happier in the long run. Just like any other athlete, we are prone to repetitive stress injuries. My brother was a catcher in baseball, and his knees, by the time he was in college, his knees were shot because he was always squatting. And this is, of course, back in the 80s. They didn't know as much back then about this kind of thing, but it would have been really beneficial for him to specifically do a lot of training in opposition to squatting, right? And make sure that they were really addressing the muscles in the opposite side of things. And that's all I know about that. So I wouldn't even know how they would train that. I'm not going to go there. So anyway, specificity, making sure that you are training yourself in the direction in which you want to go. Principle number 3 is progression, meaning if we're trying to get here, we don't start here. We start here. And we're going to work incrementally to get there. And we can address this in 2 different lenses. We can look at it through technique. If I want to belt a high A, I can't just go out and belt a high A. I have to start with, well, what can I belt? And then the technique to belt a high A is a little more specific than a technique to belt an A above middle C, for instance. Just about anybody can holler that note. You don't have to have a lot of skill level to do that, but to continue to build upward in your ability in your belting takes building technique. And then the other lens through which we can look at this is effort or distance. So it's not just technique, it's also stamina. So I want to be able to belt an entire passage or be able to belt high for 5 minutes is different than being able to pick one note out of the air. So again, as we're training, we want to keep this in mind, and we don't go straight to here. It's incremental where we're building ourselves up, and then we're also increasing our stamina at the same time. Next principle that we're going to look at is overload. And this gets a little scary for us as singers because we don't want to be hoarse and we don't want to be sore and we don't want to blow our voices out and we don't want to overdo it, right? In exercise science, to increase your strength and endurance, you need to add new resistance. I'm reading this straight from their website now. You need to add new resistance or time and intensity to your efforts. And this is the concept of you have to tear it down to build it up, which is terrifying to us, right? So we want to be careful with this. You should not lose your voice after a practice session. You should not be hoarse the next day. But if you feel a little like, I just worked myself a little bit, that's okay. We don't have a lot of nerve endings in our vocal folds, so we're not going to be able to really use our senses in that way. Whereas if we are running and we can feel, okay, I've increased my effort, we have really good feedback from our bodies, we can't really depend on that in here. So you really have to be intentional about the incremental progression where you're like, okay, so I'm going to stretch one note higher than I did 2 days ago. And then I'm going to see how I feel tomorrow. And I'm going to see how I feel 48 hours from now. Because sometimes it takes up to more than 24 hours for us to feel the effects of our vocal workout because we don't have those nerve endings. Inflammation and stiffness can set in over the next 24 hours. That's why sometimes we can sing and we do our whole gig and we're like, wow, I felt great. And then you wake up the next morning and you go, what was that? Why do I feel like this? It's that delayed onset. And we know this too from exercise. You know, sometimes we're sore one day later, but then we're really sore 2 days later. It's the same principle. It's the exact same principle. So for us, it's okay if you feel like you worked a little bit, but we shouldn't experience soreness. You shouldn't feel muscle fatigue. Because we don't have those sensors in there. If you're experiencing muscle fatigue, it means you're really recruiting these muscles out here, and you've probably really overdone it. So it's a little different for us on that. So moving on is adaptation. And this kind of, again, I'm going to read a little bit from what they're saying specifically. Over time, the body becomes accustomed to exercising at a given level. That's good. That means that we are now more efficient. It doesn't take as much effort to do the same tasks. But this is a double-edged sword because then we'll be like, well, but I'm used to it feeling this way. and then we start to push because we're trying to find that feeling. And whatever level we're at, once we are efficient, we shouldn't feel that feeling anymore. That's part of the adaptation. That's number one. So it's learning to adjust. Okay, so I don't always have to feel this thing. Once I've mastered the skill, it should feel like less effort, number one. Number two, if I'm always pushing myself to achieve the next level, which sometimes you're like, great, I'm good. I got my high A and it's easy. Do you need a B? Do you need to belt a B? I mean, I don't know. Some people can, right? Some people, like if you're constantly pushing yourself more, you're going to have to mix things up, because you're going to be like, well, this A is now easy. Now what do I have to do? Okay, well, now we have to go back in. We have to, shake everything up and start doing things a little bit differently to present a new challenge to ourselves. And so that's, you basically just keep increasing the challenge when it gets easy. That's what it means to us. The next principle is recovery. This is a hard one for singers because we want to just be able to go and 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 go, right? Moms do this too, right, Devin? It's like, no, I don't need sleep. Sleep is for sissies. So we too need to recover. Oh, and I'm reading. Are there any signs we can watch for to make sure we're not overloading in the moment? If this is tricky, you can, it's very, very subtle. If you feel like you're starting to lose your upper or your lower notes a little bit, if you sing a song, then you're like, oh, all of a sudden my low notes are gone. That's one sign. You can also very subtly, and this is hard if you're singing like with amplification or with a band or something, or an orchestra, if you feel like you're just increasing your effort more than you think you should be, and or you feel like usually when I'm singing this, my tone and my resonance is better than it is right now. Like I'm having to work harder to get the same results. That usually means you're overdoing it a little bit. But it's sometimes really hard to feel it in the moment, especially with the adrenaline, and you're really engaged with your performance. We don't want to have to be babysitting our effort, which is why we just need to be super on top of things in our practice time so that muscle memory kicks in and we don't go into that overload. But for sure, if you're losing a little bit of your range, or if you feel like, oh, I don't know how to explain it. Like I'm saying, like usually this really pings and rings, but it's not. It's not pinging and ringing right now. It's either breathy or it feels a little shouty. Then that for me, that usually is like, whoa, put the brake on it, sister. And then I'm always reminding myself 100% is too much. We never want to do 100% effort. In my practice time, I usually try to keep it no more than 85%, knowing that once the juice kicks in, the adrenaline juice, that then I'm going to bump up to at least 90 or 92, and that's still going to give me a little bit of a cushion there at the very, very top. I know, yeah, very hard, especially for those of us who are big spenders. Yeah, it's like, who needs a budget? There's an audience, right? So, okay, so let's get back to recovery. We don't like to talk about this, but we need to. I'm going to read from their website again. The body cannot repair itself without rest and time to recover. We need to say that again. The body cannot repair itself without rest and time to recover. We just want to go and go and go and go and go. And when we're talking about this, both short periods, like hours between multiple sessions in a day, and also longer periods like days or weeks to recover from a long season are necessary to ensure our body does not suffer from exhaustion or overuse injuries. So what this means is, so we sing a little bit and then we take a break. We know this. Those of us that have caroled, you don't sing for a 4-hour gig. That's going to set you up for really bad results. So you need to, like every 45 minutes, you've got to take a 15-minute break. You just have to. This is self-care here. And that's not just for caroling, that's like live. If you're doing, that's why they write operas the way that they do, and theater performances the way that they do, because a person can't be singing the entire time that they're on stage for 2.5 hours. They're going to blow themselves out. So when you are not singing, when you are supposed to be off stage resting, rest. Get a drink of water and rest. It's okay to do some straw phonation, but don't talk through your break. Don't sing through your break. Don't do it. Do a little bit of, now I'm going to cool down a little bit, and then shut your mouth. Rest. So those are the short little mini breaks, right? And then there's long, it's good to have, I'm going to practice for 30 minutes, and then I'm going to take a chunk of time, and then I'm going to come back. I'm going to practice for another 30 minutes, and then take a chunk of time. That's part of the cross-training thing. So I really highly recommend 3 or 4 practice sessions spread out throughout the day, as opposed to sitting down and practicing for 3 hours, especially if you've had some time off. And maybe you start with a half an hour and then go, okay, now I'm going to increase to 40 minutes. Okay, now I'm going to increase to 50 minutes. Okay, now I'm going to increase to 60 minutes. Now what you're doing is you're working stamina. You're increasing the challenge. That's your overload. But you don't go straight from, well, I haven't practiced more than 15 minutes at a time for the past year, to now I'm going to sit down, I'm going to sing for 2 hours solid. That would be like a marathon runner not doing any running and saying, well, I guess I'm going to go do a 10K today. They just don't do it. You have to do some building up before you can do the longer stamina type workouts, okay? And then this, I think, is really important. I don't think singers do this. Longer periods, like days or weeks, to recover from a long season. Like literally a voice vacation. I don't think that I do that. So that's my confession for today. Simone Biles, if you guys know who she is, she, is just like the best gymnast that's ever lived, ever. And after the 2016 Olympics, she took a year off, an entire year, to let her body heal and to regain the love and to just get a reset. Now, I'm not advocating that we take a year off, but taking a week off, and not total vocal rest, but just taking a week off from the hard vocal load. If a runner is taking a week off, it's not that they're not going to use their legs. They're just not going to go out and run hard for a week. They're going to walk. They're going to still go upstairs. They might even do a little jog, but they're intentionally taking a vacation for a certain amount of time. Now, for us, we need to understand that after about 3 weeks, things will start to atrophy. So if you don't want to lose your conditioning, you don't want to take a long time off. But a week is probably a great idea if you've been really pushing yourself. So, okay, so the last principle that we're going to look at is reversibility. Meaning, and again, I'm going to read straight from theirs. If you discontinue application of a particular exercise like running 5 miles or bench pressing 150 pounds 10 times, you will lose the ability to successfully complete that exercise. This is use it or lose it. So if you can, let's say you can belt a high A, you can do all of Tina Turner's repertoire, and then you stop doing that for 6 months, you can't go back and do it. You're going to have to build back up to it. So this is really, really important to understand, because again, if you take off 6 months, like if Simone Biles took off a year and then she went back in and she tried to do her competition routines, she would have broken every bone in her body. She probably would have died because she was at such a high level. So the same goes for us. Vacations are good. And sometimes if your body's really beat up, sometimes a little bit of atrophy is not a bad thing. Because our body needs to heal. And if you were competing at such a high level that you were really beating yourself up over and over and over again, then taking a step back and going, well, I'm not going to do Tina Turner for a year. I'm not going to try to do a double backflip every night with my voice for a year, because the wear and tear on my knees, our vocal folds, was too much, and it's time to repair and rehab, and then I'll build back up to it. So that's something else to consider. So you guys, that is what I had for today. That was a big, juicy chunk of stuff. And I'm so happy to have you all here. Really quick, I'm going to do a little recap. So you have the 7 in a row. Okay, ready? So number 1, individuality. Everyone is different and responds differently to training. Number 2, specificity. Specific exercises build specific skills. Number 3, progression. We want to look at both technique and effort and distance, and then we want to approach it in incremental fashion to increase the challenge. Overload. Overloading means that you are increasing the challenge so that it is not easy. You're not just resting on your laurels, but you're constantly pushing yourself to go a little bit further. Adaptation is the need to mix things up, to keep it fresh, to keep increasing the challenge when it gets easy. Recovery. The body has to have rest, or you are setting yourself up for repetitive stress injuries. And reversibility, it's a use it or lose it. And sometimes it is important to take the breaks, but then you have to work yourself back up again from wherever you are after you take your break. So you guys, that is what I had for you today. And if you have any questions, you guys know where to reach me. You can message me, you can email me, you can text me. But I am so excited about our 30-day challenge that's coming up. If you are wanting to join us, we're going to be doing a lot of self-assessing of where we're at after this year-long imposed hiatus from singing. In some parts of our voice we've kept up, other parts maybe we've let go a little bit. And we're going to be building specific plans to get us back to where we need to be